Thus I present the following verses. If there are those who can hear the exposition of the names of these Buddhas, then they will acquire innumerable merits, as the Buddha explained to Ratnachandra. I worship these Buddhas who are at present dwelling in the 10 quarters. Those who call their names will attain the stage of non-retrogression. There is in the East a world named free of sorrow, and the Buddha there is called auspicious virtue, whose physical characteristics are glorious like the gold mountain, and whose name can be heard boundlessly. If there are any who hear his name, they will then attain the stage of non-retrogression. So I worship him by placing my hands together with a wish that all my sorrows and afflictions be eradicated. There is in the South a world named joy, and the Buddha there is called sandalwood virtue, whose countenance is serene like the full moon, and whose radiance is immeasurable. He eliminates the fever and agony of sentient beings caused by the 3 poisons. Those who hear his name will attain the stage of non-retrogression, and so I bow my head and worship him. There is in the West a world named good, and the Buddha there is called immeasurable brightness, whose bodily radiance and wisdom are luminous, shining everywhere without limit. Those who hear his name will then attain the stage of non-retrogression. Thus I bow my head and worship him with a wish that the cycle of birth and death be severed forever. Question. I understand that if we hear only the names of these 10 Buddhas and hold steadfast to them in mind, we will not retrogress from attaining the highest perfect enlightenment. Are there any other Buddhas or Bodhisattvas whose names enable us to attain the stage of non-retrogression? Answer. If you say the names of the Buddhas such as Amida, as well as those of the great Bodhisattvas, while holding them single-heartedly in mind, you will also attain the stage of non-retrogression. There are various Buddhas, including Amida, whom you should reverently worship and whose names you should say. I will now state each of their names. The Buddha of immeasurable life, the Buddha world sovereign king, the Buddha lion will, the Buddha Dharma will, the Buddha Brahma insignia, the Buddha world insignia, the Buddha world wonder, the Buddha compassion, the Buddha world king, the Buddha king of humans, the Buddha moon virtue, the Buddha jewel virtue, the Buddha insignia virtue, the Buddha great insignia, the Buddha pearl canopy, the Buddha lion's mane, the Buddha dispeller of ignorance, the Buddha wisdom flower, the Buddha Tamalpatra sandalwood fragrance, the Buddha possessor of great virtue, the Buddha rain of 7 jewels, the Buddha transcendent hero, the Buddha free of anger and enmity, the Buddha great adornment, the Buddha formlessness, the Buddha jewel storehouse, the Buddha virtue peak, the Buddha Tagara fragrance, the Buddha sandalwood fragrance, the Buddha lotus flower fragrance, the Buddha adorned way, the Buddha dragon canopy, the Buddha flower rain, the Buddha scattered flowers, the Buddha flower light, the Buddha sound of the sun, the Buddha outshining the sun and moon, the Buddha lapis lazuli storehouse, the Buddha Brahma sound, the Buddha pure brilliance, the Buddha gold storehouse, the Buddha Sumeru peak, the Buddha mountain king, the Buddha master of sound, the Buddha pure eye, the Buddha moon brilliance, the Buddha resembling Mount Sumeru, the Buddha sun and moon, the Buddha having great assembly, the Buddha flower born, the Buddha expounding with the voice of Brahma, the Buddha world lord, the Buddha lion practice, the Buddha lion roar of the wondrous Dharma heart, the Buddha coral-colored pearl canopy, the Buddha dispeller of the darkness of ignorance, the Buddha moon on the water, the Buddha wreath of flowers, the Buddha awakening of wisdom, the Buddha possessing various treasures, the Buddha Bodhi, the Buddha flower transcendence, the Buddha brilliance of true lapis lazuli, the Buddha brilliance obscuring the sun, the Buddha possessor of great virtue, the Buddha having true wisdom, the Buddha heroic valor, the Buddha free from deceit, the Buddha removing evil roots, the Buddha great fragrance, the Buddha reflection of enlightenment, the Buddha light on the water, the Buddha wisdom sporting in the ocean and clouds, the Buddha virtue peak flower, the Buddha flower adornment, the Buddha sound of the sun, the Buddha moon victor, the Buddha lapis lazuli, the Buddha Brahma voice, the Buddha radiant light, the Buddha gold storehouse, the Buddha mountain peak, the Buddha mountain king, the Buddha king of sound, the Buddha dragon subduer, the Buddha free of defilement, the Buddha pure visage, the Buddha moon visage, the Buddha Sumero-like, the Buddha sandalwood fragrance, the Buddha majestic power, the Buddha torch lighter, the Buddha hard-won victory, the Buddha jewel virtue, the Buddha sound of joy, the Buddha radiant light, the Buddha dragon subduer, the Buddha undefiled brilliance, the Buddha lion, the Buddha king of kings, the Buddha powerful victor, the Buddha flower tooth, the Buddha fearless brilliance, the Buddha fragrant peak, the Buddha universal wisdom, the Buddha universal flower, and the Buddha treasure insignia. These Buddha Tathagatas dwell at present in the worlds of purity in the 10 quarters. All of you should say their names and be mindful of them.